Hello everyone, Trisha, it's me, Jenny, and it's time for another Not Naked video response to Trisha Hershberger's series Naked Truth, where we talk as candidly and as truthfully as possible about a subject of Trisha Hershberger's choosing, straight out the shower, no makeup, wet hair, etc, etc. Most people choose to do it naked. I choose not to, but there we go. It's either way, it's not a sexy thing, it is a communication thing where you're vulnerable and all of that malarkey. First take, one take, which I have to admit is not the case today, because the more I thought about this in the shower, the longer my shower got, and so I decided to get out of the shower and just spew my thoughts. And to be honest, I have done more than one take because I end up in a random tangent on this subject, and it's a very big subject. And the subject itself is political correctness, and is it such a thing to be too politically correct? And yes, it is possible to be too politically correct, but I think the ideals of political correctness is something to be really strived for and not kind of taken away. But the thing with political correctness is it is basically politeness and trying to be empathetic and use language to remove as much miscommunication as possible and try not to offend any group or cause harm to any one group or any one person. And that's a great ideal. It's a wonderful aim for any type of communication, to try and, you know, treat people equally and fairly and, you know, be nice. And it's a very idealistic, beautiful goal, but everyone has different opinions on pretty much every subject. So when it comes to political correctness, that sort of legalisation of what is and what isn't correct is a very, very unknowable thing. I feel like the context of any conversation has to be taken into account. So, for example, if someone is on a sandbox to say a speech and give their opinion, then their opinion should be respected. And that, it's a kind of ironic thing about political correctness, is in order to be politically correct, you have to let everyone share their opinion, even if you don't agree with it, even if their opinion is completely wrong, or, in your opinion, completely wrong, or completely selfish, or completely unpleasant. The political correctness is the right of every individual to have an opinion, and also the right of every person to try and treat everyone fairly, and those two things do not match up. They are complete opposites for a lot of contexts. Someone has the right to stand up on a sandbox and say the most offensive things possible, and a politically correct person can say, you have the right to say that, but then can disagree. And that's kind of, it's interesting and idealistic, and something that it's very hard to quantify. And language is such a crucial thing when it comes to any sort of communication, and political correctness and language is a very interesting subject matter, in that there is so much room for miscommunication with language. You know, the way that our mind works can be like a way someone feels, and the way that they feel about something else can be expressed with words, but more often than not is incomplete when expressed with words, but that is how one communicates. And so, you know, even with the best intention in the world, you can miscommunicate and you can say something negative that you didn't intend, or if you take into context of history, you could say something that for you personally doesn't mean anything offensive, but to the person you're talking to, there could be history, there could be cultural things. I've talked to people before and I've said something completely offhand, like the word, this is an actual genuine story, is I said the word liar. And immediately had someone jump down my throat because they're not told, nobody calls me a liar, and it wasn't even in reference to calling that person a liar, it was using the term liar in a sentence. And that was a very interesting relationship with that person, which I won't go into. But there is context to every individual, there's context to every culture, there's context to every cultural group, and that context could be current, ongoing, or historical contexts. For example, the Confederate flag has a lot of history, and unfortunately most of the history associated with that has very negative connotations, so therefore the current political ideals state that part of history is not necessarily polite and nice for current society, while, you know, way back when it was a lot more, it didn't have the context that it has now. There's a lot of words, and language is a very fluid thing, it's an ever-evolving thing, so there is the context that something that maybe 100 years ago was the most offensive thing in the world is now part of the regular vernacular, or even, you know, the official RP, you know, standard English language, or language, the standard of whatever language you're speaking, while something that you say now which isn't offensive at all in 100 years or 20 years or even 10 years could be the most offensive thing to say. It's things like the fact that you can't call care of the elderly geriatrics anymore because that is considered offensive. It really is. Language is a very fluid thing, so take into the context of the current situation, the timeline you're in. It is very easy to offend anyone, but I think intention and context really do have to play into it. If you know that you're going to stand up on a sandbox and say something that could be very offensive, you need to be aware of that context and the consequences of that context. And the history of whatever you're saying needs to be taken into account, and if you choose then to say something that isn't politically correct, you need to be able to judge with the consequences of saying that thing. I've talked for way too long. I honestly don't know if I've ever said a single thing. I know I said a lot of words. I don't think they made any sense whatsoever, but there we go. Thank you for watching. Feel free to comment if I made any sense whatsoever, or if you have any thoughts on this subject at all. I forgot to send Trisha last week's video, so link to that in the description if you want to see my opinion on whatever it was. I was very tired that video. I was so tired. But there we go. Thank you for watching. Oh, it was bad dates. If you want to see my story on a bad date, go see in the description. Thank you for choosing the subject, Trisha. And I will see you guys all next week for another Naked Truth, and tomorrow for another daily vlog, because daily vlogging is the thing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys all soon. Bye guys.